Matt Harmon of Reception Perception here. It's time for another edition of the RP Mailbag. Let's open it up and see what you all have to say. We have a ton of great questions here as draft week begins. Let's get into it. All right, first question up here comes from Ayukin. I'm definitely guessing that's a Brandon Ayuk based name, which is great, and I love it. You spent some time going back and forth on how to rank Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze in the stacked prospect rankings, and then you discussed that you put Marvin Harrison Jr. at the top. Can you explain your reasoning? Yeah, I will explain this, and as I said many times for new people, it's worth noting that I went back and forth for a good, long time. Here in Harmon headquarters, in the draft room, me, the two dogs, Peach and Charlie, we all sat in the war room, and we had to just decide, who is the number one ranked receiver in this class, because to me it was very close between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rome Odunze. Yes, Malik Neighbors is in the same tier as those players in my stacked ranking. All three of those guys are in tier one of the stacked rankings, but I did end up going with Marvin Harrison Jr. over Rome Odunze. That was the close call. The reason I did it, honestly, it is very, very close. One of the biggest reasons is if you've read Marvin Harrison Jr.'s reception perception profile, you know that he was double covered on over 16% of his routes, by far the highest in this class, more than double or just a little around double the amount that Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze were doubled. And he still had an incredibly high success rate, 70% success rate. So because of that, the extra defensive attention, I think the overall long-term polish of his game, I ended up going with Marvin Harrison Jr. in a very slight race over Rome Odunze for the top of this class. And the reason that I stacked Rome third in the stacked rankings behind Jamar Chase, remember this board goes back to the 2021 draft class. So at the top of my rankings on this stacked board, it goes Marvin Harrison Jr., Jamar Chase, Rome Odunze. The reason that Rome was third behind Jamar Chase is I think Jamar Chase he brings you a different level of pop after the catch. I think Rome is the better route runner coming out. I think Rome Odunze is the more refined technician coming out than Jamar Chase, although I think Jamar Chase was very underrated as a technician coming out of that draft class. I just think the explosive ability with the ball in his hands and kind of on top of a lot of the strengths that Rome Odunze brings to the table in terms of being a good technician and winning downfield is ultimately why I thought that Jamar Chase had a slightly better prospect profile than Rome Odunze. All right, let's bring up the next question here. This one comes in from Queasy. What receiver prospects will have a bigger NFL impact than a fantasy impact? Honestly, I think there's a good bit of guys in this class that it could be that way for. And if we want to be honest, it's hard to have a fantasy impact. It goes beyond just the player's ability, right? It's situation-based. It is role-based. And for that reason, I do think there are a good amount of kind of guys in this class that are, speed-based receivers, might dictate coverages. I think Troy Franklin might be a guy that has a bigger NFL impact than a fantasy impact if he doesn't develop, right? I've talked about this in Troy Franklin's reception perception profile and on the podcast, that he's a guy that has the route running chops to be a full field receiver. You're looking at his route chart right now. But you look at routes like the slant route and the dig route and his press coverage success rate, which is the lowest mark in his profile of the three success rate versus coverage scores. If those don't tick up, if he can't beat press as an outside receiver consistently, and he can't win on those dig routes and slant routes, and a lot of this I do think comes down to his frame and just his overall kind of approach to the physical part of the position. If he doesn't get those things ironed out, he could end up just kind of being in that lid lifter role where he's very good, and we're always kind of wondering why doesn't he get a full target share? Why isn't he approaching more of a 22, 23, 24% target share in his offense? But he makes big plays. He's a high yards per target, yards per route run type of receiver. It might be because he doesn't develop on those base NFL routes like dig routes and slant routes over the middle of the field. I mean, we want our receivers, especially in today's NFL, winning and running routes over the middle of the field. So he's someone that I would mention. I also think Roman Wilson fits into this regard as kind of like a high high yards per target player again. Maybe potentially just he can win in very certain areas, but he's not like a full field route runner. Not a guy you're gonna funnel a ton of volume to. But all right, let's go on to the next one here. This question comes in from Nire. How different really are George Pickens and A.D. Mitchell as prospects? Wide receiver 1 potential as the X, but evident concerns. Yes, later this week I'm going to have a video on A.D. Mitchell coming out on the channel, fully breaking this down and actually kind of going into that George Pickens prospect comparison fully. So I'm using this as sort of a teaser for that video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you know when that video is coming. Get the alerts set up. Stay tuned, okay? Because that's going to be a good breakdown. But this specific comparison I do think is really good. I think they are actually similar. If you look at my stacked rankings, they're pretty similarly tiered between those two draft classes. X receivers with a volatile profile. They show you an ability to beat press coverage off the line. They show you an ability to high point the ball, to really be a true ball winner. Those are guys have. And again, a lot of clean translations to that X receiver role. The reason I think that A.D. Mitchell is a little bit better of a prospect than George Pickens is I think the true one-to-one isolated reps, I see more refinement and more fluidity in A.D. Mitchell's game in terms of beating man coverage than I did George Pickens coming out. So that's why I did rank Mitchell a little higher in the stacked rankings than George Pickens. But overall, very similar archetypes. And look, George Pickens has not... he had a really nice season last year, but he hasn't kind of put it all together. And, some of that is him. Some of that is that he's played in a really bad environment with bad quarterback play. And he's been very volatile because of it. This player archetype is inherently a very volatile player archetype. And then you put him in a situation where you have bad quarterback play and a kind of weird and terrible offensive environment. They're going to be even, that volatility is going to shine through even more. So A.D. Mitchell is very susceptible to that based on where he gets drafted. All right, next one up here comes from Adam Q72. Is Roman Wilson's stock hurt by the offense he was in? What if he'd gone to LSU, for instance? Man, I kind of balk at this stuff. Like, you know what Roman Wilson would have been if he had gone to LSU? He would have been Roman Wilson. He would have had the same skill set. Like, we can pull up Roman Wilson's route chart here. The reality of Roman Wilson is that, yeah, he could have made some plays, in these slot fade type situations. If we're really talking about this LSU offense, right? If you really are thinking about taking him and basically putting him in Malik Neighbors' role, because Malik Neighbors was the slot receiver there and Roman Wilson's the slot receiver. Okay, so great. He can run some of these over routes on play actions, his spread routes. He can run the corner, all that stuff. But he's just not good enough from a high volume perspective to be that player, okay? And that's really the reality of it. Look, like, he's going to run corner routes. The success rate's not great. He's going to run these slot fades. Okay, he's maybe an average separator when it comes to these downfield routes. I think overall players are players, okay? Like, they're in the offense that they're in. The goal of reception perception is to isolate a player from surrounding variables. I think that Roman Wilson was used appropriately. I think he was used to his best ability with what Michigan asked him to do, which was to be a slot receiver that worked over the middle and, made some big plays there. And you see the dig route success rate. That's kind of really where I think Roman Wilson fits in best. And I think he'll be a good player in that very limited role in the NFL if he develops and all that stuff. I'm not that high on Roman Wilson, if you can tell. But I do think there's a role for him at the NFL level. I just don't think like him playing in a different offense really has anything to do with it. Sure, would he have produced more? Sure. But it wouldn't have been anything like the other guys at LSU did. And at the end of the day, he would still be the same player. That's ultimately how I feel about that. All right, next one up here comes from Tony Doke 6. Which college offense has been your favorite while charting wide receivers so far? You've been plenty mean to the Texas offense, but I'm curious if there are any that you dig or at least find endearingly fun. Yes, there are plenty of offenses I did not enjoy, Texas being one of them. I'll actually say that Michigan's offense, when we just talked about Roman Wilson, I really like Michigan's offense, probably because I'm an NFL snob, and it's very NFL-ish. I love the way that, like, I became higher on J.J. McCarthy while working on Roman Wilson, because you see JJ McCarthy like truly work the middle of the field and standing there with, standing there with stones and throw the ball over the middle, like do real NFL stuff. So I like that offense. I don't know how you can not talk about Washington's offense, though. I mean, I can't wait to see what Ryan Grubb does in Seattle. I actually think that there's a chance that, and I was high on the Seahawks last year, so we'll see how this ages. I actually think there's a chance that this Seahawks passing game is very undervalued in fantasy this year, just because Ryan Grubb's going to want to attack all three levels of the football field. He's going to want to spread this thing out a little bit more than the previous coaching staff did in Seattle. So that was an offense that I really enjoyed because, they just attack you vertically. Some of these vertical concepts I think are going to map really well onto those Seahawks wide receivers. Even JSN, who was kind of, Jackson Smith-Njigba was pigeonholed in this like low A-dot slot receiver role. I think he can do a little bit more from a downfield route perspective. So Washington's offense is the easy answer there, but I would say I enjoyed Michigan's as well. Neil asks, if the Bills stay at 28, who is your favorite for them to take at wide receiver? The favorite answer would be A.D. Mitchell if he is there, okay? I think if he's there at 28, that would make so much sense because they just need an X receiver. They need someone to play outside, run routes against press man coverage, and win because they have two guys in Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel that I like. There's a Curtis Samuel video on the channel that you should definitely check out where I go into more of the skills that he brings to the table beyond just like the gadget stuff with him. He's more than just a gadget receiver. There's no question about that. But you want these guys playing multiple different roles. You want them to be pre-snap motion players. So who's your ISO receiver there? A.D. Mitchell would be perfect for that. Again, if we're thinking they're sticking at 28, I think he would really, run those vertical routes. The route tree you're seeing here would be very reminiscent of like what Gabe Davis did for the Buffalo Bills. Now they're going to want more than that. And if you pull up A.D. Mitchell's route success chart, he's definitely can do more than Gabe Davis, right? Like Gabe Davis is not winning on these underneath routes. And again, there's going to be a full A.D. Mitchell breakdown on the channel. Probably should have, saved some of this for that video, but definitely make sure you check all this out. From one of these other prospects that might be good for Buffalo if they stick at 28. I mean, honestly, none of these other guys really jump out to me as like players that need to be going at 28. I think it's a little rich. Ricky Pearsall might make sense because I think you can get away with playing him at X receiver. You can get away with playing Curtis Samuel at X receiver, and then Khalil Shakir is your slot, and you got three guys that you can kind of move all around the formation. But ultimately, I think that if they're at 28 and A.D. Mitchell's gone, Brian Thomas is gone, Rome Odunze, obviously all these top guys are certainly off the board at this point. I think they're going to be in an interesting spot there because nobody that's going to be right there kind of sticks out in terms of the type of receiver they need. And I also think if you're taking a Xavier Worthy there, you're taking a Troy Franklin, you're taking a Xavier Legette there, like I think you're starting to reach a little bit. So we might then see Buffalo maybe double tap the position in round 2 and round 4 if they get into that spot there at 28. All right, next question up here comes from Diorsky. How much do you evaluate surrounding talent taking up targets and opportunities for a prospect? Yeah, it matters. Like, it's hilarious to me, again, not to bring up the Texas offense, it's hilarious to me that people are like, oh, Xavier Worthy, he started off his career so productive. What happened? Like, why was he not as productive towards the end of his career? Probably because a big-time recruit, A.D. Mitchell, came there and took volume away. Like, that's how it works. Targets are earned, yes, and like volume being distributed is all part of how good you are as a player. But that surrounding talent is gonna take those opportunities away from you. Like, it just is what it is. So, when we're looking at these offenses, especially some of these, like all these guys that transferred from Georgia, right? Like Jermaine Burton, second season there. Brock Bowers' his first season. He's outproducing all these guys. Yeah, he like Brock Bowers basically single-handedly screwed the production profiles early in the career of A.D. Mitchell, Jermaine Burton, and Ladd McConkey. 3 guys that are going to go very high in this draft class. What would their production profiles have looked like if they didn't play with Brock Bowers? It would look different. So yeah, you have to evaluate surrounding talent, taking up those targets and opportunities when you're looking at a prospect. But again, that's why I do what I do, and I chart the film because it shows you who these players actually are away from the influence of some of those surroundings. Next one up here is from Prospects. Is the Drake London hype, taking a little break from Prospects, Is the Drake London hype getting to be blown too much out of the water, at least for fantasy-wise, being drafted as high as wide receiver 9? What do you see the statistical ceiling being? I'm going to say this. As a big Drake London guy, I am concerned that the bubble's going to burst here, okay? I'm a little concerned that we're going to go too far with Drake London. Could he outkick a ceiling of wide receiver 9? Yeah, because he's really good, and Kirk Cousins should be healthy and is the perfect type of quarterback for him. Again, we have a Drake London video on the channel where I break down just how perfect Drake London is for this offense and for this quarterback. So definitely check that out. But all of that analysis can be true, and he could still be slightly disappointing in fantasy if he's being taken at wide receiver 9. Like, I have him ranked in Dynasty, I think wide receiver 10, wide receiver 9, something like that. So I think he's capable of having these type of ceilings. But everything else around him needs to come together, and it is an older quarterback. It is a quarterback coming in with an injury. So there is a chance that the Drake London stuff does kind of get over the skis here. And then, like, you're going to have some idiots that, like, see, he was wide receiver 15. What a disappointing season. If Drake London is wide receiver 15 after the way his career started, that's a great season. That's exactly what you'd want to see out of him in his third year. So these expectations could really kind of almost put just take reality out of the situation where we're going to have a point where every NFL analyst is like, wow, Drake London having a really great season because he's on pace for 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns or something. And then fantasy goofballs are like, I really got my hopes up a little too high. So keep that in mind when we're thinking about Drake London and some of these preseason rankings. Next one comes in from Kaba Laba Ding Dong. I don't know, whatever. Which 2024 wide receiver prospects would you trust on the grill, and which ones would you not trust on the grill? Okay, well, this one's easy because, look, I'm not trusting Troy Franklin on the grill. There's no chance, okay? You see this guy? He doesn't trust his hands. Just the reality of the situation. I like Troy Franklin. I think he's a pretty good prospect. Like his route running. I do think he needs to gain some weight. It's another reason maybe I don't trust him around the grill. What does Troy Franklin's diet look like? Is he eating enough protein? Questions worth asking. Is he even grilling himself? But look, I'm not going to have you on the grill if I can't read, read confidently into the film that you're going to be able to hold on to the football over the middle. Okay, can't trust you. Okay, just reality of it. Which ones I would trust? Oh man. Ladd McConkey guy, just a completely assignment, detail oriented in his route running. If you're going to work the grill, and listen, and when I say we're grilling here, I'm not talking about you're throwing a Bubba burger or a couple of hot dogs on there, okay? We're doing real man grilling, real big boy, big girl grilling, okay? We're working with charcoal and real fire. So yeah, can some goofball turn on a gas grill and throw a few Bubba burgers on there? Yeah, sure, okay. Maybe I'll trust A.D. Mitchell to do that. Maybe I'll trust Xavier Worthy with you can't win in tight coverage. You could probably win on the grill. Sure, I guess, if it's a gas grill. But we're talking about real detail-oriented stuff here. I'm looking for one of my route runners. I'm looking for Ladd McConkey, very detail-oriented. I'm looking for Rome Odunze. I'm looking for Marvin Harrison, okay? I'm going to go to the top of the grill kind of rankings here. And Marvin Harrison is uniquely gifted as a technician, and I trust him to know the right amount of wood to charcoal ratio, what vents, the vent situation at the top of the smoker. I trust him to know that and figure that out because he's got the wide receiver position all figured out. Our last question comes in. What a stupid rant that was. Our last question comes in from K-Man. A little complicated here, but if you were in a one-round 32-person draft of TV shows and drafting one meant that no one else could watch it ever again, but someone else drafting a show meant you could never watch it again, would you take a show you really loved and deprive everyone else of it forever? Or pick something esoteric that you personally love and hope no one took your favorite show, but take that risk for everyone else's benefit? I think this is crazy if you don't just take your favorite show with the pick, right? 32 people, 32 shows. There's going to be a lot of, deprived folks out there in terms of the arts, in terms of these shows. So I don't give a shit about everybody else's enjoyment, okay? I'm taking something that I know I'm going to like. Also, your little esoteric show, how often can you watch that over and over again? Because here's the deal. We're about to get, 31 other shows wiped off the board. How many shows do you like? I know there's a lot of good content out there right now. I know okay, here's a good example. I love Kitchen Nightmares. I'm a big Gordon Ramsay guy. Love Gordon Ramsay. Next Level Chef, Kitchen Nightmares, give me all that stuff. How many times do I want to rewatch Kitchen Nightmares? That's kind of trick question because it's a very rewatchable show. But like Next Level Chef, let's take that for example. It's a competition show that I love watching. My wife and I watch every single episode. We love to do it the week it comes out. Great show. Am I drafting that first overall? I don't think so. Because then 31 other shows are going to get wiped off the board. And how many other shows do I like? I like a lot of shows, but how many shows do I want to rewatch, right? So that's the thing. Call me like super basic, but I'm taking The Office or Parks and Rec first overall because it's just eminently rewatchable. I'd probably take Parks and Rec over The Office. My logic there, as a fan of both shows, is that I think The Office had a better peak. I think Parks and Rec is a better show. Parks and Rec also hits you in the feels, maybe a little bit more than The Office. So I would probably take Parks and Rec, and like all the TV snobs out there, oh, what a reach. You took Parks and Rec first overall. There's so much quality television. 31 other shows are getting wiped off the board here. So I need something that I'm actually going to enjoy. And yeah, am I just going to be making all the Parks and Rec inside jokes to myself? Probably not, because everybody's seen the show. Everybody that is going to watch the show has already seen the show. So they'll still get the jokes. They don't need to watch it again with me. I just need to watch it myself. What an outrageous way to end this, but I think a very productive way to end this. And really, truly, an insight into my brain, which is a poisoned, toxic, it's not great to be trapped up here, okay? But hopefully you guys got something out of this mailbag beyond what, how I think about shows. But I appreciate it. If you disagree with it, tell me your show pick in the comments, or tell me anything else that you had a problem with that I said here in the last, 18-ish minutes or so. That's going to do it for this edition of the RP Mailbag. Again, it's draft week, man. The draft is coming up. We're going to have another AD Mitchell prospect video on this channel. We're going to have another mailbag for the draft, okay? So a lot of stuff coming out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to receptionperception.com to get all the profiles, all the write-ups, all the route charts, and the stacked rankings before the NFL draft. Man, I can't wait for Thursday night. Can't wait for Friday night where a lot of these receivers are coming off the board. Until next time, I'll see you.